Welcome to Alia & Co., the podcast where we talk about complex things and we break them down and we make them simple. Today, our topic is anxiety, something that a lot of us have experienced. And if you think about it, I mean, there's this really interesting story. It was a case study, a psychological case study that was very well known, where a man was so anxious that he faked being blind and then forgot he was faking it. And I mean, this is an actual study that was done. It is something that is well documented. It's like conversion disorder in psychology. And so this guy had so much social anxiety that he would not want to go out in these social settings because he was afraid of judgment. At some point, he started basically using a cane. He stopped driving, stopped going out completely, and actually then started becoming blind. And a few months later, he goes to the doctor and he's just like, and the doctors do a study and they see that there are no like neurological, physiological, no actual medical evidence of the fact that he was blind. And literally he just remembered, oh yeah, I'm not blind. And he got his vision back. And you know what? Honestly, that's like an extreme example, but I would say in my experience, I've done stand-up comedy. And I just remember when I first started doing stand-up, I was so nervous. I was so anxious. And I remember over time, I developed a stomach ulcer. So I think that is a very real thing. And today we have a guest that is the subject matter expert. She has written a wonderful book, The Empowered Mom, Manage Anxiety and Stress. Yes, us moms, we get a lot of anxiety and stress. It is just a fact. We have here Lori McKendree. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm super proud of the book that I wrote.
Yes, I think that is something. It's something that really needs to be given more attention because, yes, we all are in this society of there's so many different stressors that are evident, but no one talks enough about all of the different levels of stress that moms need to kind of like be exposed to on a daily basis and need to navigate through, So I do want to kind of scale it back and just rewind a little bit. And in terms of your experience, I mean, you're a mom. How old are your kids?
So my son is a sophomore. He's 15.
Okay.
And then I also have an 8th grader. She's going to be turning 14.
Oh, so. Amazing. So, I mean, and that's the thing as we were talking before is that there are so many different phases of life. And definitely. I think that the stressors in each sort of category are very different, but they're still stressors. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned that your son was about to start driving. I feel like that is one of the biggest stressors. So, I mean, I would love for you to kind of like, at least kind of help us understand, where this kind of impetus to write a book like this began.
I would say the inspiration to write this book actually stemmed from a very challenging time in my life. I was struggling with, spiraling and anxiety in my current career, in my emotions. We had gone through a lot of changes, a lot of things out of my control. And I was not ready to make decisions about that, but I really needed something to redirect my focus into something positive. And, as a mother, I've also found myself very busy with the kids' activities and the household chores. And I needed something, like I said earlier, for myself. And in the back of my mind, I had always wanted to write a book. Mm-hmm. I wanted something that I could have like complete control over. And I think those AI bots on like Facebook and Instagram must have like read my mind because all these self-publishing classes started pulling up. Mm-hmm. And I started doing some research. And then last year in January on Facebook, I had a friend post that she self-published. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited for her. I immediately bought the book on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to her and I, congratulated her and I asked her questions. And she was so amazingly gracious about the information she gave me, about helping me out, the class. And I have to say, purchasing the class was like the first step in like a different direction. It gave me actually writing the book has been so inspirational. It gave me so many things. Like, one, it gave me something to channel and redirect my energy.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it gave me an outlet to learn a new skill.
Right.
Like, I learned how to publish on my own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And three, I gained so much knowledge and understanding of how I was feeling. And it also offered a lot of self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, going through and like putting the book together through the table of contents, and then, researching all the medical advice and all the other articles, and really thinking about like my past and like adding in my story in the book. Really, that was empowering for me, because I believe like when you can acknowledge the way that you feel and when you can put it out there, you have the ability to control it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say, I'm not doing well today, what can I do? That gives me the control back,
Mm-hmm.
not the negative spiraling or the underlying current of anxious feelings.
Right. And I think that that's very beautifully put. Certainly, I think specifically where you have ideas that are floating around in your head, right? When you put pen to paper, it is organized very differently. Which is why a lot of people say that journaling and just be having like a prompt and kind of like reacting to it in the moment. I think perhaps maybe the way that we've been trained from an educational standpoint is, you have the topic, you have the beginning, the middle, the end. Perhaps maybe we are so used to doing that at least when we put pen to paper, it is something that becomes a little bit definitely more coherent. It becomes evidence. There's some facts there. There's something to jump out at you in terms of your like the ideas that actually matter, right? Whereas in your head, I think a lot of moms are in that space where we're spiraling. There's so many different thoughts that are happening. And so I find that it's really beautiful that you were able to take ownership and really kind of like nurture that identity of yourself by writing this book. And the book, Managing Anxiety and Stress, certainly that's, obviously the experience coming from all of the different, experts and scientific and even lived experience in your mind and in your experience in itself. Tell me, like, when did you first realize, though, that anxiety and stress was something that you were dealing with?
I have dealt with anxiety and stress probably for decades. I want to say the first time that I ever took medication was probably in my early 20s, but it had stemmed before that. So in my early 20s, I had graduated college and I was living on my own. And, I found myself job hopping for financial security. And that in itself, kind of not knowing my identity, chasing, different positions, really gave me a lot of anxiety. And, bouncing through friend groups and, the medicine, I did see a doctor and the medicine did help. And as I started easing into a new position and, my friend groups, started to evolve and have better friendships, I, gained some more confidence in, in being able to go off the medication, as well as, doing other hobbies and redirecting myself, redirecting my energy. I did a lot of fitness programs then. But at that time, I had the time to do a lot of fitness. And, I had a lot of spare time to spend with my friends. So I was doing essentially, a lot of self-care to take care of myself. And then, I met my husband and we did a lot of exciting things, which was very fulfilling. We traveled a lot and we bought an older home and we remodeled that. And that really gave me a lot of outlets to, redirect my anxiety. And then, when I had children, when my children were young, that was a very difficult time for me because I was working full time and, just trying to manage young children. And, we didn't have a lot of support. My children went to daycare full time. And I think just the managing of the house, my children at a young age really had spiked
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of anxious feelings.
Mhm.
And I remember, like, at the daycare that my children went to, I met a lot of like really nice moms, and I opened up to her one day and I just said, I just was shared my feelings, and she said, I have just what you need. She invited me to a boot camp class.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so like a physical fitness class.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that was the catalyst. That was probably one of the first points of catalyst for change.
Mhm.
And, being a new mom and like realizing that you need things for yourself,
Mhm.
you need things for your well-being so that when you come back to your family, you feel good.
Right.
And and then fast forward to writing, I'm going into fitness, and I came into another part of my life where I found myself, in a very, very challenging time emotionally.
Mhm.
And that's when I decided to write the book. And writing the book, like I mentioned before, was a lot of self reflection. And I remember, like, when I was writing the chapters, like, thinking back, I thought, I would get a lot of compliments. Like, how do you manage all that? Or how do you do this? Or how do you do fitness and run your job and do, run your kids around or
Mhm.
stay in their activities? And when I was writing the book and reading all the articles, I thought to myself, wow, I do some of this.
Right.
So putting a lot of that to pen to paper,
Mhm.
a lot of in each chapter, I try to talk about myself, and a lot of it is things that I had been doing, but now they're enhanced just by learning about it
Mhm.
and really trying to grow from the things that I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, 100%. And that's the thing is that we as women, um, go through a lot in terms of even our hormones, right? That
Mhm.
those fluctuations, you don't, there's no certainty there, right? You just kind of,
Right.
you really don't know. I mean, having a cycle the first time you started, then having a baby, and then, nursing, and then not. And then, you hit perimenopause and then menopause. I mean, we're always fluctuating. You have a
Mhm.
few kids, you've done that a few times. And so I think that specifically then balancing it with a job, a full-time job, and then all of the different kids' activities. How do you think that that's not stressful? That's totally
Yeah.
stressful. And again, I think that a lot of us don't give ourselves enough credit. There are some moms that totally make it look completely flawless, where they're so well kept and they show up to every meeting, and their kids, they're religiously getting there. She's packed the snacks and she looks so put together, and she just came from and it's just, you see that. And, but you don't know what's going on the inside.
Mhm.
You could be crying yourself to sleep every night. You don't have any support. So, I mean, I think that is something that's very interesting. So, tell us how you kind of came to this place when you were like, okay, this is a lot of self reflection, but I'm sure certainly there were things that you were also doing to help self regulate. So, I'd love to hear about that.
So, when I was writing the chapters, I interestingly came up with calm.
Hmm.
So in the book, I broke the book down in like four sections with chapters. So calm is clarity, action, liberation, and mastery.
Hmm.
So, each section of the book kind of goes through clarity. So we're going to talk about, like, I think it's important to understand where your anxiety is stemming from.
Hmm.
Like, is it stemming from health?
Hmm.
You're not feeling well. Is it financial security? Is your anxiety, do you have perfectionist tendencies? Are
Hmm.
you a procrastinator? Like, a lot of these things can attribute to not feeling well.
Hmm.
And then we talk about triggers. And then, um, and then in the action section, we talk about how to manage that. Once you acknowledge it, like, what can you do to help yourself feel better?
Hmm.
So, and then in the liberation, we talk about, um, building confidence, making good decisions, getting rid of like mom guilt, emotional intelligence. And then mastery, we talk about self care. Like, how do you take care of yourself and how do you fit that in? And like the different facets of self care. Self care doesn't necessarily mean, you know, getting your hair done or your nails or what other, things that you would make an appointments for. Self-care can be reading a book, taking time for yourself. You know, doing fitness is a part of self-care.
I certainly think that. I think that that's
Yeah.
where, when your kids are super little, as you're just kind of running around, like you don't even know how you're just trying to just above the water, just keep above the
Yeah.
treading, But I do believe that at least with exercise, that is also the first thing that I gave to myself, where I realized that, okay, these are habits that I can stack. Once I've developed this habit, there are other things that I can do to improve my life balance, So certainly there's that. So I love that acronym that you have, because
Thank you.
yeah, it's clever. And I think also the biggest portion of it is that awareness, whether it be emotional intelligence or just awareness of everybody else around you, and also the triggers in your environment. Let's talk about that a little bit more. How did you come up with this acronym? And is this something also that you systematically kind of figured out for yourself? Like how, it's like one day you were just sitting there and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I've got it. This is what I'm going to do. So tell us about that.
So when I started writing the book, I was going through titles and subtitles, and, I started with, okay, this is how I feel. This is how I want to end up feeling. So we're going to go from managing anxiety and stress. We're going to redirect that energy into calm and confidence. And that's kind of how I came up with the calm. I think just writing and going through the sections. But, going through my day, sometimes I would remember just in the morning being completely frazzled. Like, okay, this has to go, we're getting out the door, and then you have practice, and then you have practice, and then I have to be here for work. And then I get a call, Mom, I forgot my uniform. Yeah. Or you get everybody out the door and you look at the table and you finally get back in and the iPad's sitting there.
Yeah.
So those are a lot of things you can't control.
Right.
But the one thing, one of the things that really helps me is being very organized.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a list maker. I love to-do lists, but they can become overwhelming. But I think it's important, to put everything you need to do, for me, is to put it on paper, because I'm releasing my mind of that burden of remembering.
Yeah.
And that helps me tremendously. I even have, I think Oprah once said, she has a pen and paper by her bed. Yeah. And it helps because I don't want to sit there and not sleep all night because I'm thinking, don't forget to do this. Don't just get up and write it down.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I agree.
So that is one of the biggest tools that I use is list making, and just being very organized. Even when my children's sports schedules come out, and I'm not a big list maker on my phone. I have one of those daily planners that I like to physically see the whole month.
Right. Agreed. Me too. Yeah.
And I'll put down every game, whatever their activities are, every work meeting, every work lunch, and kind of go from there. And it's also about communication. Thankfully, my husband has a flexible schedule. So every morning, we'll decide who's driving them to school and then who's taking who at night, because they both have activities in different directions. So we each kind of choose based on our schedule who we can help, take to practice.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely, so now with these lists that you're making, and I think by extension, a lot of people, the Google calendars has been something that I can't live without now. For me, I have ADHD. It's a mess sometimes, I think that your mind is a mess. You forget things, not even intentionally. But the thing is, we're also being bombarded with so much information. Look at the school system. How many emails do you get?
Yes.
I'm sure that the amount of emails, and then, for whatever reason, everybody else saw it and everybody else does it. And you just miss one. And literally your kid is like, you didn't do that. Now I can't go. So it is definitely something that I think that as a society, because of the amount of information, and also the first time you have kids, you're not sure. You don't know what you're getting into. You don't know how a classroom functions and, what each specific teacher requires and doesn't. especially that first time when you have little kids, trying to understand what the responsibilities as a parent are, right? So definitely being organized is huge. Developing systems. It's hard to develop these systems for sure. But I want to get back to anxiety. I know that you mentioned that, of course, this is a way to calm it down a little bit. But describe what flustered looks like to you. I'd like for, because I think that perhaps, let's say that somebody's watching and it doesn't know that they are anxious. What is anxious? What is being anxious? And how is something, well, this I'll ask after, but explain what that is. How does it manifest in a human being? What is a good amount of anxiety versus an unhealthy amount of anxiety, if there is any?
Okay. Well, what anxiety looks like for me is it's that undercurrent of like constant worry and pressure. It's that, overwhelming to-do list. Then it's managing my career. And then it's the household chores. And then it's taking care of my family's needs, all bundled into one. And it's where my mind would just race 100 miles an hour. And I'm on edge. I'm like, what's next? What's going to go wrong?
Right.
What am I, how am I going to get it all done?
Right.
So that for me is what anxiety feels like. And all these emotions are, swirling around. It's just like a constant worry. And, the way that I try to manage it is, like I said, being organized, take that to-do list and put it on paper. And you're not going to be able to get everything done, and things are not going to always go the way that you want them, but to learn what you can control and what you can't. And if there's one thing that you can control, and we've all heard this, on every podcast, it's how you react to things. So, really working on myself and how I react to situations also helps my anxiety, because I don't want to go to bed at night thinking, why did I say that? Or why did I get upset over this? I should have just handled it, or said, or whatever the situation was, handled it better than the way that I did. And so that underlying worry and pressure, that's what I try to talk about in my book, to try to help dissipate, through systems, through learning how to communicate better, through setting boundaries. Because one thing that I realize is that I start falling apart, my house starts falling apart when I don't communicate well and when I don't set boundaries. And what that might look like is saying to my husband, you know what, it's a busy day today. Can you pick up dinner? There's like an Italian little place around the corner from his work. Can you grab dinner? And if he's like, ooh, I don't know, then we're ordering out. Or, maybe we have leftovers or a simple dinner. What that also looks like, is maybe reaching out for help elsewhere. Like if I need my mom, can you help with this? Like instead of holding it inside and assuming everybody knows what I need, learning to communicate what I need. Because I found people want to help, but you need to let them know what to help with. And it's also setting boundaries, especially when the weekends come and the friends want to come over. I need to say, hey, it's okay. Friday night, you can have a sleepover, but Sunday, we're all waking up, just our household.
Right.
I don't, no kids over. Or, hey, I made dinner tonight. We're not going to Chipotle. Setting those little boundaries. And when you don't set those boundaries and you end up going to the drive-through, or you have the children over that you didn't want, that's when you also start spiraling. And those small little things start adding up.
Right.
So that's like one of the biggest things that I'm working on, even now, is like learning how to communicate better and hold firm on my boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely as an extension to your household, as well as your work scenario, and also extending to a social circle. Boundaries are definitely important. How about people that maybe don't know how to find where their boundaries are? What would you suggest for somebody who maybe lived in a kind of brought up in a space where maybe they just don't know what their boundaries are? Like, is there a way, do you think, to kind of like discover that, or maybe lean into knowing what a person's boundaries are?
Well, I think in a work scenario, it's important to first understand what is bothering you. Like if you need the space at work to have lunch yourself,
Mhm.
and a coworker is, constantly interrupting your lunch, saying, maybe setting up a boundary like, "Hey, I know this is important, but let me finish my lunch and then we can talk about that."
Mhm.
So I think knowing what your triggers are.
Mhm.
So if you need that extra hour of space, or understanding, in your social situations, understanding that you don't have time to help out.
Mhm.
So realize that and communicate that. Don't leave a situation saying you're going to do something
Mhm.
and then go home at night and it cause you more stress and anxiety because you didn't say no.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding your limits.
Right.
So I need a break.
Mhm.
I do not have time to help at the school field trip.
Mhm.
I do not have time right now to help with, in the classroom.
Mhm.
And that's okay
Mhm.
to admit that,
Mhm.
and you need to be okay with not being able to help, but also communicate that as well.
Right. Do you feel that a step to knowing what your boundaries are might be also to realize what your triggers are? Everyone has different triggers. You could be somebody who overthinks themselves, or, overthinks every kind of anything that might happen. Do you think that there's a way to know what your triggers are?
Well, I do talk about that in the book. We
Mhm.
have like a trigger mapping
Oh,
exercise.
so walk us
So,
through it. What are my
so
triggers, Lori? Tell
okay.
me.
So, well, first you need to acknowledge what your triggers are. Are you in a is it financial? Is it medical?
So if
Is it
we're
social? Is it work-life balance?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, so I would say that if we're trying to find my triggers, how can I acknowledge what my
Yeah.
triggers are? So maybe a different phraseology of maybe what my problem is right now, like
Yes.
what is bothering me most right now,
Mhm.
right? I would say, yeah, probably maybe my daughter is leaving for college and I kind of feel like, oh, what's going to happen? Because like my two girls are going to be gone and I'm going to miss them. And I don't know, initially I thought but I think that's something that is a problem. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's a trigger, but maybe I'm overthinking it too much. I don't know.
Well, what would I say? So it's kind of an emotional trigger. You have an attachment. You're
Yeah.
worried about what your life is like, what's coming forward. Like the
Mhm.
girls aren't going to be home anymore. How are they going to be in college? You know, are we going to communicate every day?
Mhm.
So, so you've acknowledged that you're a little worried when they go away.
Mhm.
So you would acknowledge that. Then, you have some worry, and then solve the problem.
Mhm.
Say, you know what, when you go away, let's have a phone call once a week,
Okay.
or let's text every day.
Mhm.
Or I'm coming down, you said they're going to be in state. So
Mhm.
maybe you drive down there once a month
Yeah.
or once a week,
Yeah.
once every other week.
Yeah. Not every.
You
I
plan
also have a life.
you plan time to go see them.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? And I know as simple as it is, perhaps maybe it's something that was just been weighing in my mind.
Mhm.
But the fact that I verbalized it was like, yeah, that is something that is bothering me. But you're right. I guess like having a strategy, that feels good.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's how that's what helps me.
Mhm.
Is I try to, okay, so this is the issue. This is how I feel.
Mhm.
What can I do about it?
Yeah.
Um, there's also one thing that I always communicate. You do not need to feel good to do things.
Okay. I'd love to have you elaborate on that.
So there are days where I don't feel well,
Mhm.
like, inside, or I might be sad, or I might be spiraling a little bit because I'm very anxious because I have a lot of things to do.
Mhm.
Even though I feel that way, I can still get things done.
Okay.
I'm just going to, I'm going to take a step back,
Mhm.
just take a breath and say, okay, And sometimes I just schedule it out. Like, okay, we're going to do this. And sometimes it sounds funny to like verbalize this, but in my mind, I'll be like, okay, so we're going to drop the kids off. I'm going to come home. I'm going to make sure my son's uniform's laundered, and I'll get the dog outside, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to completely focus on work for an hour and a half.
Okay.
I'm going to get all these emails out. I'm going to respond to that person. Maybe that was giving me anxiety, responding to a client, and I'm going to get it off the table.
Right.
So I think, really having a strategy and a redirection for your energy helps.
Oh.
So that is the subtitle of my book, Practical Strategies to Redirect Anxious Energy into Productivity.
Yeah.
So when I feel anxious, I really try to redirect that energy into something productive.
Okay.
So let's say, you are completely at your max, but you still need to make dinner at the end of the day. So think about that. Just take the focus off of you and how you're feeling and put it towards something else.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like a tactic that I use a lot. I just take that focus off of me and put it towards something else.
Yeah. I like that. I was reading this book. It's Letting Go. And they talk about how we choose to have the feelings that we have. I can choose to really like you. I could choose to hate you. Like, I was just saying is that, I think we choose it. And so sometimes we choose to ruminate and feel, and we cycle. And it's very confusing in the mind because it just keeps popping up. It's like, they say that we have 60, 70,000 or 700, I don't know how many more thoughts than I expected that we have a day. We have so many thoughts, and a lot of them are all the same thoughts that you had the day before, the day before, the day before, until something different happens. Then your mind shifts and, but I do believe that there is something to being able to be present with what you have and, choosing your thoughts. I mean, I'll give you an example. People that fall in love, you never expected this person to show up and all of a sudden now cloud nine. And that is something that is very shifting. It completely shifts your energy, but we're capable of it. We're capable of allowing ourselves to feel a certain way versus not. And at least from what I'm hearing with your, redirecting, right? Productivity is super important. And I think that for everybody, especially moms, I think a gauge of our value sometimes as moms in business, moms at work, moms at home, moms that volunteer. I think so sometimes like a gauge of our success as a mom depends on the amount of productivity that you have. Do you feel like that's the case?
Yes. And I feel like a lot of moms, that is something that gives a lot of moms anxiety is like they weigh their self-worth on that.
Yeah. I didn't get the laundry done. I didn't wash the dishes.
And one of the things that I'm also working on is, your mindset and being present. And I think when you can accept that not everything is going to go well and, have gratitude for what can go well, you kind of shift your mind from valuing yourself by how much you do.
Right.
It's much better to be, I have found that being present for my children and hearing what they say is much better than running around cleaning and trying to get everything done. Right. That goes a lot farther for them and for me.
Right. No, agreed. So, and if you're thinking about like parents and moms in general, that idea of that overwhelm, as you say, like, let's just start at the very basics. For that mom that doesn't even know what to do with her state of overwhelm, what would you even say to them to get started?
Well, my first question is, where are you feeling overwhelmed? And if it's just everything, I mean, that's a normal thing to say too, because sometimes when you're a mom, you don't know where to turn. You have so much on your plate. Society puts so much on your plate. Like you said, you have the emails coming at you. the kids' functions, you have your home, you're taking care of your family. There's a lot of things. So what I would say would just be to start with, just kind of breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, being organized really helps me. Sometimes just taking my mind to paper and just start writing down, even if you're journaling, writing down how you feel, what you need to get done, and then go from there. And just with your mind, just keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when I have stood there, like just kind of ruminating and spinning, like, oh, okay, and you just have to you have to have a mindset, and you have to want to change the mindset. And it does take a lot of work,
Yeah.
but you have to be in the mind. Like really try to work on, okay, this is what I need to do, and just keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%. I think that pinpointing that is definitely important. Stress 100% is
Yes.
what we experience as moms. But where does stress, how can you differentiate that and clinical anxiety? Is there kind of like a sliding scale when it comes to that? Stress can be, okay, even for say a guy, having a heart attack, being stressed out about his job is one thing. Maybe there's stressors in family life or just overwhelm of some sort. But where do you think there is stress and what the behavior that comes from that stress, the feelings of that stress? And then where does it go into medication, clinical anxiety? Do you think that there is a fine line between that? How would you identify what stress is? Normal stress, normal mom stress, or is there something more to it, you think?
Stress is, for me, would be like everyday stress.
Mm-hmm.
So stress would be, I'm super busy and someone forgot a book or they forgot their uniform. Like stress is like something that happens, and you can, you know, an action fixes it and then it dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that like lingers or is like an underlying feeling that you constantly have.
Mm-hmm.
So stress is generally triggered. Something triggers stress, like you forget something, or small things like, the lights aren't turned out. There's dishes in the sink. Those things like are like annoyances, triggers that promote stress.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I just cleaned the kitchen. Now there's a sink in the dish, or
Oh, I have to do this. Okay, you're thinking of it.
yeah. But that feeling, once it's resolved, goes away.
Mhm.
Anxiety is, like I mentioned before, it's like this fear or worry that's like almost relentless. Like it doesn't leave. And you always feel on edge.
Mhm.
Like you're like, what's next? Or you're always anticipating like something like the worst.
Right.
You're always thinking, okay, well, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Mhm.
What if it's always a what if, or
Yeah.
what's next,
Right.
or I don't know how.
Mhm.
And what I'm working on is taking that narrative out. How can I stop that narrative? You cannot control everything that comes your way.
Right.
So learning to control what I can helps me work through what I can't. So if I can control like my house, like, taking care of my home, or if I can control my morning and evening routines, like my morning routine, like getting up and enjoying that space for me and being organized. Maybe throughout the day when something pops up, I can be like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
So like the more you can learn, more things that you can control, that gives you that sense that when things happen, you can handle them better.
Mhm.
So that's what I would say. So clinical anxiety, I mean, I have been on medication and it did help me.
Mhm.
You know, I just think if you do need to speak to someone, that's always a great avenue.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need to talk to someone.
Right.
Sometimes we all read what I've written in my book.
Mhm.
We all hear it on podcasts.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need someone else to really coach you along
Right.
and to help you through those moments. And that's okay too.
Yeah. I think that you talk a lot about community. sometimes we think that we're doing everything on our own, and this is the expectation. This is what it looks like to be successful, to be productive, to have it all together, to be that perfect person, specifically with social media and how everybody's highlight reel is out there, but nobody talks about those moments of darkness sometimes, or worry, anxiety. So I'd love to hear more. What are your thoughts on that?
Social media, it's good and bad.
Mhm.
Social media can be a sense of community. You can be part of groups that are very uplifting and encouraging. Or if you find that your feed is something of comparison, then
Mhm.
I think that's when you need to clean it up. If you're always looking at someone's perfect life, someone's perfect house, someone's perfect, in your mind, their children or their husband, and then you're coming back to your situation, that's not a good place to be in.
Mhm.
So, I do talk about social media in my book. I
Mhm.
think it's a time sink. When we talk about not having enough time, how many times have you caught yourself on social media and 25 minutes goes by?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about how many times you do that throughout the day,
Mhm.
well, you might have found the hour that you need
Mhm. Mhm.
to get other things done or
Right.
to get yourself organized
Right. And not even organized.
or
Be lazy on the couch if
or
you want
take
to
some
give
time to
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
I think social media is one of the biggest sources of anxiety.
Yeah.
Not only does it steal your time, it offers a platform where you can find yourself comparing yourself to others.
Mhm.
And, those things that we really need to manage, we're so good about managing our children's social media. Sometimes we need to audit our own.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that getting into community in our society now, we are very connected through this kind of
Mhm.
medium. Good ways, bad ways. I would say some good ways are perhaps maybe there are people that I would have never continued to have connections with had
It's
I
true.
not been, and so that's a good thing. But then there are the ills, right? Like exactly like you mentioned, is comparison, comparing your life to someone else's. Sometimes we're comparing it to people we know that we consider our community, which are other moms. I remember I was a stay-at-home mom. I was on the PTO, and
Mhm.
that can be very toxic. It's a bunch of people that are in the same boat as you.
Mhm.
And we're all trying to manage this very stressful experience of navigating that productivity of the output of my kid has to do well. I have to help them learn things that is their homework if they're little, helping them with their homework, and just even different stages with the cars and whatnot. Do you think that sometimes community can backfire? The right, I
The
mean, there are wrong communities and there are
Yeah,
right communities.
I do, and I think that's why it's essential to audit your community.
Yeah.
We are gonna be put into situations where we might, have other women around that we're not comfortable with
Mhm.
or who, have a tendency to say things that we're not comfortable with.
Mhm.
Um, but I think going into those situations, just learning how to manage them.
Mhm.
I have to say, like, doing the research and going through my book, I've learned a lot of things on, like, how to manage that.
Mhm.
Like, sometimes I would get anxious going into certain community circles
Mhm.
or certain groups because I wasn't sure, like, how to communicate, or sometimes some women would say things to me that did make me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And that if there's one thing that I've learned is that you never know what's going on in someone's life.
Mhm.
So, before I go into those situations, I just kind of think to myself, okay, where am I at today? And I remind myself, I don't know what anyone's going through. I'm having a good day. So, in my mind, I'll be like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to engage in engage in conversations. And sometimes I make a mental note, like say something nice, like be engaging.
Right.
And then there's days where I'll think I'm not in a good place. And
Mhm.
then those are the days I decide that I'm just going to be a listener
Right.
because I never want to say anything to another mom that they're going to take away because I don't know what place they're in to,
Right.
and that they take that home with them.
Mhm.
So I think in our communities, if it's I always just try to be the most positive person that I can.
Mhm.
And, on the online and social community, I've really tried to clean up my feeds. Um, on some of my feeds, it's all motivation.
Right.
So when I go to it, like the other day, I was sitting at my desk and I needed a mind break. And I went to social media and I thought, I don't know if I want to work out today. And the first person that came up with was like David Goggins. You don't need to be motivated to go to the gym. I'm like, okay, I'm going to Pure Barre. I guess I'm going to work out today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I had the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's important too, just recognizing, who are your friends, who you might need to stay away from a little bit, who you're not that good of friends with.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's okay too. You can't be friends with everybody.
Yeah. No, agreed. I do think though sometimes, and I think you have to be at a level of strength to be able to get to that place. And it's an evolution. I mean, certainly I feel like I'm still working on it. It's a practice, right? Everybody is, there's always going to be a problem, and it's going to be nuanced and very different, and you still have to navigate it, right? But I think sometimes maybe the case of having to continuously be in situations like that. For example, we have kids, and the kids, they might have friends that might be part of certain families of parents that maybe you don't enjoy, and the thing is, though, these kids are friends, so you continuously have to have these interactions with individuals that maybe you may not enjoy, Sometimes I see moms that are continuously trying to get into certain circles, at least way back when. My kids are much older now, but it's a real thing where you're chasing after these groups that are cliquey, just because you want your kids to be, invited or to have friends. And I think that a huge source of confusion and sadness happens when you are trying to kind of infiltrate these spaces. And so would you have any advice to somebody like that, at least in terms of managing that in terms of anxiety?
I can relate to what you were saying. I remember when my daughter was in elementary school, there was like a big group of ladies and their friends. And I remember there was a large sleepover. And I want to say my daughter probably was one of the only ones not invited.
Yeah. It happens. We feel bad. It happens.
It's hard. And the one thing that I think I try to, with my children is I try to develop their own hobbies and their own interests. And, my children like sports, but I think involving your children in like introducing different interests to them helps them build their own community around the interests that they like.
Right.
And then sometimes these things don't matter.
Right. That's true.
Like whatever club it is, if it's theater, if it's math club, if it's chess club, if it's sports, just trying to find things that are in, because every child has some kind of interest, even if it's art or writing. The one thing that's great about our area is we have a lot of resources. There's a lot of different things children can get involved in. And I think to reduce anxiety about not being in certain situations or certain friend groups is for them to develop their own identity.
Right.
And then they develop their own circle of friends. And then they build their own community around the interests that they like.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, be the person you want to meet, right? I think that was something that we need to teach our children too, is that if you're naturally enjoying yourself, because our children are a source of stress in some format, because we want good things for them, and so, by extension, but definitely, enjoying life for what it is, not just taking the picture of what life looks like and posting it, that's not the case. So and I think that a lot of moms then feel this kind of sensation of like having to have like some sort of responsibility. Do you think moms can also develop their own interests? Say, for example, if maybe there are around other moms that might be making them feel bad. Like the working moms are like, no, I can't, blah, blah, blah. And then the stay-at-home mom is like, well, she's always busy, so she shouldn't. Or maybe it's like, oh, she's at home all day and da-da-da-da, and she doesn't understand what our struggles are like. Do you think that there is something outside of community, or maybe finding better communities that perhaps maybe at least for a mom to be able to find or extend kind of within their sphere?
Well, I would say the same thing that I suggested for children, for other moms. Find yourself. you know what? Find something that interests you. Like for me, it's fitness. And through my fitness, I made a great group of friends.
Mhm.
So we do things outside, and I've created my own community. Writing the book, even though I wrote the book myself, but it gave me an outlet where I found so much enjoyment.
Mhm.
So I think as a mom, or just as a person, having your own set of things that hobbies to give you that, that mental and emotional stimulation
Mhm.
and happiness, you will be more happy. The more you nurture your own well-being, the better you are for your family and for yourself,
Right. Yeah.
and whatever that means. So if that means, right, if you want to sit down on the couch and watch History Channel or Bravo, that might be something that makes you very happy.
Mhm.
But when you find moments that make you happy, you bring that forward,
Mhm.
and you're better at managing your day-to-day things, and you feel more fulfilled.
Right.
So I think that would be my advice to other moms or
Yeah.
just women. Find what fulfills you.
Right. I think it's also prioritizing it.
Prioritizing. And too, there are moments where you can't fit another thing in.
Mm.
Like that's completely overwhelming.
Right. Right.
And my advice there would be what I try to do in those moments where there's nothing else going to fit in.
Mhm.
I'm maxed out. Be true to yourself.
Mhm.
Make sure that you communicate well.
Mhm.
Do the things within your limits. Set your boundaries.
Yeah.
Understand what they are. Like if you mean no, say no.
Mhm.
Because if you take that yes home, where you meant to say no, you're going to add to your anxiety. You're going to add
Right.
to that emotional distress because you're going to beat yourself up for it.
Right.
So I think it's like learning to have the courage to stand your ground and saying what you mean, learning how to communicate better.
Right. And I see this theme ongoing in a lot of people that I talk to. But I was at a Jeffersonian dinner last night, and we were talking about being true to yourself. Right.
Mhm.
You actually expend more energy trying to not be yourself by catering to somebody or not having the boundaries or whatnot. It is really easy to be you. So the thing is that when you are not being you, when you are pushing so hard to be something that you're not, that's when you feel the most kind of strain,
You do.
you know?
Yes.
But so now let's talk about moms that are home and they are like maybe they are supporting, a husband who has to work and maybe they're just stay at home moms. And, I know that these sometimes, and that's where I was. My husband had a very busy profession earlier in the marriage, like he was training. And I just remember being a single parent. What would you suggest for somebody in that situation where they're this kind of the sole caregiver, or maybe they're a single parent? Maybe there's been a divorce, and now you are on 100% of the time. Um, how would you suggest somebody in that situation kind of like decreasing that kind of stressful burden?
I'm not sure there is, because that's a hard place to be when you
Mhm.
manage everything on your own. I think managing the way that you go through your day is important.
Mhm.
So if you're overwhelmed, like I said, learning how to communicate effectively and standing and knowing how to set boundaries. Um, if you're a stay-at-home mom, sometimes I feel like they're the most stressed
They are.
because that's a huge job,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of expectation behind that.
Mhm.
You're expected to take care of the home, the children,
Mhm.
yourself, and, take care of everything outside of the house, meaning like your responsibility to drive the children around.
Mhm.
Sometimes the husbands put that on the
Right.
wives that are at home.
If you have 3 kids and everybody has
Like I
activities between
work
4
and
and
yeah.
7, how are you gonna be in 3 places at one time?
So I think, just staying very organized. Like I knew a mom who had the Google schedule and it was all time blocked,
Mhm.
and she was amazing. She
Mm.
was a stay-at-home mom, but she had it down to a T. And I
Yeah.
and I just remember seeing her schedule, and she's like, I have to be here to
Mm.
here to here.
Mhm.
And she would like communicate that and articulate that, and she owned it. So
Yeah.
I think if that is what you're doing, be proud of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everything you do during the day,
Mhm.
like be proud of it.
Yes.
It
Yeah. 100%. But then I think also not comparing yourself to
Yeah.
everybody else, because I remember there were times where my kids, I remember it's Girl Scouts, and I didn't do something with a uniform for many months. So like, and that I felt bad about, but like just in general, it's like sometimes like you just can't go. Sometimes you're exhausted. I remember having a toddler, having to drag him around everywhere my other girls went.
Hmm.
That's exhausting for the toddler too, to have to be at every activity.
Ask for help.
Yeah. So
It's
that's the thing.
important to,
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. But also if you do drop the ball every now and then, maybe you need it.
hmm
Maybe it's okay. You don't have to be perfect all the time. And everybody is very different. I mean, some people are hyper regimented, hyper scheduled, definitely need to some semblance of a system. But if you do drop the ball, it is also okay. If your house is not clean all the time, that is okay.
hmm
I think that sometimes we think that everything has to be perfect. And it's like that guilt of like, oh, I didn't do this, and I have to make sure that I'm doing that, and I have to be a part of this event, and I have to go, I have to return because they've invited me. And so now I'm exhausted, but now I have to host a dinner and I don't want to. So I think that a lot of it, but I think that also recognizing that you can't do everything. And it's, if you have dropped the ball, you actually need it too. Maybe you actually needed that space. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I have a section in my book where I do talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's the section in being mindful.
Mm-hmm.
And how that relates is, you know what? It's about being fully present,
Mm-hmm.
that and accepting yourself for the situation that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many times have you cleaned your home and it's dirty the next day, and then over the weekend it becomes clean again?
Yeah.
Just realize it does not need to be done right now.
Yeah.
And just accepting that it's okay if not everything's perfect. And sometimes that can be a hard place to get to too, because you feel like that's your job.
Right.
Like you're home,
Right.
everything needs to be in order.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when you need to take a step back and enjoy, and really just enjoy your family. Because like we were talking about earlier, time goes by fast. And I think it's also important to take time for yourself.
Right.
So when you take that moment for yourself and you have a moment to decompress, I think that's when you feel like, when you nurture your mindset, that's when you have a little bit more clarity in realizing not everything is important. Not everything needs your immediate attention.
Absolutely.
And then within that moment, say, okay, well, what really needs to be done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know I need to do this or that, but you know what? These 3 other things, they can wait till the weekend.
Right.
We do not need to get the laundry done. Like, close the door.
Yeah.
Just
If your body's exhausted,
if your body's exhausted,
then don't push
take
yourself.
the time.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I 100%. If there's a message that you can walk away with someone can walk away with when they read your book, there's one thing that they need to know, what would you say it would be?
I want to say that being a mom, there's a lot of different stages. And I think accepting the stage that you're in, and really, finding time for yourself is like the most important thing. When you nurture your well-being, you're better for your family. So, if you have young kids, asking for help. And or napping when they nap. If your children are in a lot of activities, finding time for yourself, like maybe you find something to do while they're during their activities. I think like my clear through message that I would like to say is to like try to redirect some of that negative energy into something positive. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like this over assertive, productive, something to show for it,
Yeah.
but something that makes you feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what helps manage those spiraling emotions and, helps you get through. Find yourself, and then things will start falling into place.
Exactly. Find what you like. Find who you are. And I think that a lot of times we look outside of ourselves for things, but we are also capable of enjoying and kind of, we should put ourselves first, which I think that a lot of times as moms, we're put last.
It's hard.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. For sure.
It's very hard to do that. But I think, just finding the time for yourself and even if it's like 15 minutes of rejuvenation,
Mm-hmm.
you'll find that when you come back to where you need to be, you're in a better mindset.
Right. And I think by extension, and not just to moms, I mean, a lot of what you're saying is very relevant to anybody who has any format of anxiety, is that, perhaps maybe there's an imbalance when it comes to work or school or relationships or whatnot. I think balance is very key. But in order to get the balance, you need to have a certain level of mindfulness and awareness. So, I mean,
I do talk about work-life balance in my book, and it doesn't necessarily need to be paid employment. It's all outside activities. And it is hard to find a balance, but you really need to understand you need to understand your values and what you're trying to accomplish. And you need to have good communication and boundary setting. So you can't accomplish everything. And when you're trying to find balance, you need to understand what's truly important to you and what does not matter.
Right.
And that's where you're going to find balance. You will feel better if you say no to the things that you mean to say no to find the space and time, either for your family to relax or to engage in hobbies that you want to be in.
Right. And not just, I think, things, but people as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we just keep allowing toxicity into our lives, and we think that that's okay, or maybe that's what we're just supposed to interact with everybody. No, it's like you're like layers, of an onion. You can't just give yourself to everybody. You have to peel one layer if they deserve it, and then allow to, it's like you can't just reveal and expect from everybody, but you can expect from yourself. So that should come first.
Yeah.
So I'd love to learn. Is there anything that you're working on currently, or tell us where you're headed? I love this book. And actually, to be honest, it's very, very important because it's not a subject that is discussed as much as it should be.
So I actually wrote the book from my experiences and like things that I'm going through. And I have to say that book brought me so much joy. Just the whole process of it, like putting it together, writing the manuscript. I'm writing another one.
Yay! Tell us about it.
I would love to have it, published by summer, because I want to call it like my pool read. It's just like it's called like, I haven't finalized the title, but it's called Self-Love, like Positively You. I just want it to be like all positive, like how to find yourself, how to like, how to find style. Because sometimes as moms, you kind of lose style. Like you go from like 30 to 40 to late 40s. You're like, should I be wearing that?
Yes.
But yes, wear what you want.
I know. Actually, I love that, because I think that's also a concern, and I think our bodies fluctuate too a lot as moms, because it's like you have these kids, you lose the weight, maybe it piles back on, you don't know what's happening, you go through all these different stages. And then your fashion is also affected by it, I mean, and then it's like everything that's loose around the stomach,
I'm working on a book, and it's kind of what I'm going through. Like really finding myself, like, I wrote a book.
Yeah.
Like, I want to talk about how other moms can accomplish maybe something they thought they could never accomplish.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Just kind of talk about, I don't know, just everything positive.
Right.
I want like a hot pink cover. I want when you read it, you put a smile on your face. Just something fun. And then, going into the future, I want to write a lot about like things that I learned. Like I want to learn like effective communication.
Right.
Like I listened to that podcast, Jefferson Fisher.
Jefferson
I
Fisher's
love listening to him.
Yeah. He is from a family of like trial attorneys or something like that, I think.
He's an attorney. He
Yeah.
gives different scenarios and how to work through them. And I'd love to write about like maybe like critical thinking, like decision making. I don't know. I really found a passion in writing. It's definitely, it's helped me. It's given me a creative outlet.
Right.
And, sometimes when you're talking about like certain friend groups or being in certain social situations, for me, it's easy to say no, because I'll be like, okay, I want to work on my book.
Yeah.
So I found something to like kind of redirect myself
100%.
that gives me so much joy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, just in terms of being a mom, business and podcasting and meeting cool people, and there's always events and stuff like that. It's like, it's nice to have different outlets, but you have to find them.
Yes.
I didn't always have these outlets. I created them for myself, And so like when it comes to all of these, where we're sometimes a lot of moms are very hyper focused on certain interactions and and it kind of like consumes their world, I think to that it's so important to find your own path. That's even more when you need to find your passions. So yeah, no, I totally agree. So no, tell us, where can we reach you? How can we learn more? I'm dying to know.
Well, after I published the book, I did start my own Instagram author page.
Okay.
And I'm working on building it up. So that's a new outlet for me too. I need to learn how to post on IG, a lot better posts than I'm posting.
I mean, it's a process. So, what is your handle?
It's l.m.mckendree.
Okay.
So it's my author name. l.m.mckendree.
I love it. Amazing.
l.m.mckendree. Yeah.
Yes, l.m. Okay. I love it. Well, thank you. I really appreciated this conversation. I think a lot of moms as well. And whether or not you're a mom, to be mom, or are not having a baby, not planning on it, if you're just anybody who is anxious, I think just this is a very good parallel to draw because I think is all kind of bottles down to your communication and your self-awareness and, giving back to you. So I really appreciated having you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay.